Hello and welcome to the National Timely Action Hour podcast. This is the show where we talk about everything from comic books to Star Wars and everything in between. I hope that you are all doing very well. I'm having a nice day myself. Today we are on Season 2, Episode 4. What is the Comics Code Authority? And what authority does it have? I just added that last part in, but this is going to be an episode where I talk about the CCA, or the Comics Code Authority, which for a long time had the ability to censor or, just censor what comics were published. And so basically, the Comics Code was formed in 1954 in response to proposed U.S. government regulations on the publications of comic books. So, around that same time, there was a book by a psychologist named Dr. Frederick Wertham, and he wrote this book called Seduction of the Innocent. And basically, it had claimed that comic books were negatively influencing children and youth. And he had such claims as Wonder Woman inspired girls to be unfeminine, or Batman and Robin were in a homosexual relationship, and other malarkey such as that. And he said that it would cause children to not listen to their parents and get involved in delinquent behavior and do poorly in school and all sorts of bad things that were completely false. And as a result of this, a body of mothers and teachers who would review each comic coming out had the deciding factor of whether or not it could actually be published. Now, that's sort of a broad statement, but essentially all of the publishing houses could publish without the CCA's approval, but it would be very difficult for them to sell if they had ignored the CCA. But the code, there wasn't really any regulations. They couldn't really enforce any rules on the publishers, but it was the guidelines that they followed for many, many years. And as I said, it was put in place in 1954, and Marvel Comics Group didn't abandon it until 2001. And then DC Comics and Archie Comics both abandoned it in 2011. So quite a while for this to be in place. And the CCA was also partially responsible for the ushering in of the Silver Age of comic books, which came out around that same time with the first appearance of Barry Allen, aka the Second Flash, and the Martian Manhunter. And, because of the Silver Age, we get characters like Barry Allen, Martian Manhunter, Hal Jordan, the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Black Panther, so many other characters that would not exist without the Silver Age, and that was begat from the CCA, which was begat from Seduction of the Innocent by Frederick Wertham. Now, as much as I love the Silver Age and the characters that came about in that, I'm not a big fan of the CCA. I mean, there were stories in the Bronze Age, like Snowbirds Don't Fly, from DC, which was when Green Arrow's sidekick, Speedy, got addicted to heroin, and Spider-Man's best friend, Harry Osborn, I don't remember the name of the story arc, but he got addicted to pill popping. So, drugs were banned from comics because of the CCA, as well as sex and sympathetic villains, alcohol, straight out murder, and so many other things that were considered taboo. Homosexual relationships, all sorts of stuff that were deemed too risque for the 1950s and 60s started to have a resurgence in the 70s and 80s, and as a result of that, they're like, maybe we don't have to worry about this code. And then by the early 2000s, as I said, 2001, Marvel's like, okay, fuck this. We're not going to listen to you anymore. And then 10 years later, DC and Archie were like, we're not going to listen to you anymore. But I don't know if Dark Horse Comics and Image Comics, which both came out in the 90s, I don't think that they followed the code. And other publishing houses like Milestone Comics, I don't know if they did. But the three main publishing houses that adhered to it were DC, Marvel, and Archie. Now, do I like those comics? Yes, I do. I will admit that Archie Comics is a guilty pleasure for me, but, I'm mainly about Superman, Spider-Man, and those guys. But, and I like a few Image books. But, yeah, the Comics Code is a very interesting part of the comic book medium's history. And one might shudder to think, or one might be elated to think about what would have happened had this not been put in place. But then again, the early to mid 1950s, this was also put in place because of fear of communism spreading, and so they're like, okay, commies and gays and Nazis, they're going to be the villains if they even do show a prominently gay or queer character, or non-binary, or whatever your preferred pronouns are, but it doesn't really matter to me, but what you choose to do with your life. I'm just saying that if these characters were at all featured, they would most likely be put in a villainous role. And so it's just interesting to look back on this. Some new readers might look back on this and laugh, but people who have been around for a while, like myself, I was born in the late 90s, but I still grew up reading older books that my dad had collected and some newer books at the time. So, some of those still had to be approved by the CCA, but, for older readers, it's a big part of the comic book reading experience. So, thank you so much for listening to this episode. I had a fun time doing research into this and making it for you guys. I sincerely hope that you enjoyed it, and I sincerely hope that you have a wonderful day. Honestly, I mean that from the bottom of my heart. You guys are great, and I hope that you are happy and healthy. And I can't believe it's already September. At the time of recording, it's just about 3 in the afternoon on the 1st of September, 2022. So, man, oh man, time flies. But, so thank you for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.